Are we live? I think we're live. Hello, everybody.
We're live.
Oi, it's October.
Hey.
It's October. It's October.
Oh,
we are so excited to have Oz here with us today, discussing a very fun topic, which is scary data, or when data gets scary. So Oz, say hey to everyone.
Hello, everybody. Hello, I'm glad to be here with you all. I'm big fans, and but let me say something. I want to clarify something. Robin just said fun. Data is not fun.
It
It's
is
brutal. It's brutal.
Maybe
People
I'm a
have had
masochist.
people have had their legs pulled off, blinded, all kinds of things. Data, especially when the stuff we're going to talk about today, scary data.
Scary
I'm scared
data.
now.
To
I'm
be
scared now. Nobody,
Yes, you
please
need
don't
to
pull
be
my legs
scared.
off, please.
No.
Also, part of the regular crew here is Jenny Von Corder and Bill Shander. You guys say hey to everyone. Bill,
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I am scared now. I wasn't scared before we started. I'm very, very nervous now, but I'm alone in my house, so I think my legs are okay for the day.
All right.
Maybe that's hubris. I don't know.
And
I
never really thought of data and loss of limb in the same sentence before, but Oz, I'm with you.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah.
Jenny, you apparently have some scary data sorta behind you on your screen.
Oh yeah, this is just my temporary background today. Is a poster that was created to show how many people are killed annually by animals, and behind me that you can't see is the shark, but apparently cows kill more people annually than sharks do. And deer certainly do. So,
right.
and then Oz was saying, what do we mean by kill? We need to disaggregate that a little.
Yep. And that's part of what makes data scary, because you can go run out and tell your friends to stay away from deer. They kill people. Cows kill people. But then what does kill mean? How is that defined? Does that mean a deer came in the shower with a knife and stabbed you to death?
I saw that movie.
Yeah. They had to take that one down. You can't see that no more, except in like back alley places. But does 180 people a year annually killed by deer? Does that mean people hitting deer with their cars and dying?
Or deer hitting them?
Yeah. Or eating some bad venison. What does kill mean?
It's possible. Trample.
Trample.
Could be trampling. We can't know. We can't know from this very simplistic and possibly useless but scary presentation.
Yeah. And that's the thing is when you're an analyst, you gotta be skeptical. As a citizen, you should be skeptical when you start seeing data like this. Ask questions. That's not the end. That's the beginning.
Oh yeah, I love that. So let's just dive in.
Yes.
And go around and tell me your definition of scary data. Like, give me a sentence or two of what you think of when you think of scary data. Anyone? Yeah. Bueller.
All right, Jenny, you take it. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Pick on me because all of you had written so compellingly about what scary data is. But one of the things that makes data scary for me is when I ask where the data came from, and there might be a source, but I find that source unreliable. In the past, I've dealt with data that they've collected. Their collection methods aren't that good, or perhaps
scary.
Accidentally, but sometimes intentionally. We've all seen those surveys where we're asked a set of questions where each of the answers is an answer that's repugnant or incorrect from our point of view, but that's the limited universe we're given. So when I get data from sources that I automatically mistrust, or I find that the collection methods are bad, then the entire enterprise of that data seems scary to me.
I would agree. Bill, you got any thoughts on what your idea of scary data is?
Yeah, so excuse me, I feel a little bit like the odd man out in this group sometimes because you're all data analysts and I'm a data communicator who does some analysis. And so for me personally, scary data can be really big data or, super complex data. Like, the things that I worry about are different than the things that you or somebody else might worry about at times. And so I think the point there is that scary is in the eye of the beholder, right? Ooh. We all have different perspectives, different points of view, different skill sets. And so data is scary for all kinds of reasons, which to Oz's point, we should be scared. We should be skeptical. We should be questioning everything because no matter where we fall on a spectrum, our perspective on that data is going to be lacking something. And that lack is the thing that we should be sort of honed in on, focusing on, worried about, concentrating on, et cetera. And another thing that I find data scary are the implications and the context around the data. So I did a project for a school system and the data said close half the high schools because they had too many high schools. And it was like, ooh, the political implications of that data is like scary as you know what. Mm-hmm. And so there are all kinds of things that be scary about data. So I'll stop there.
I so tickled when you say you're the odd man out when I really don't think you are. I think we all do a little bit different, but we all share a lot of the common things that we have to do as a part of the function of what we do. So I always get tickled when you say that. I'm sort of with both of you.
And Oz are real like hardcore data analysts, and I do a little bit of analysis, and I do more of the communication stuff. And so it's odd man out is too strong.
And that's funny because I think Oz would say that he and I do entirely different things. I don't know.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's all data to me.
Maybe different
that's
tools. True. But before Robin and I answer, I'm curious about Bill. What do you mean data communicator?
So, my primary job is my title that I use is information designer. So I take information, which includes data, and I help communicate it with people. And so maybe I have someone who has a giant pile of data and they found some really interesting insights in it. Sometimes I'm helping find those insights, but not always. And then I'm making data visualizations and helping express that data for an audience. So it's more about translating the insights into a format that people can then understand. So it's data work, but I'm frequently not doing the actual analysis myself.
Interesting.
That's fascinating because then I'm curious about if you might communicate something that's wrong. Like when I've been asked to help somebody clean up some data or extract certain details out of data, and then I get in there and say, hold on a second. No. Do you see all these duplicates? Do you see all these incomplete entries? Do you see these wild numbers, addresses in a name field, all of this? And I said, no, we can't do this here.
Field. That's scary.
Yeah, all
That's
of that.
Definitely scary.
Yeah, but I don't have a definition of scary. I'm just always skeptical. Always looking and probing and picking and asking questions. And when numbers look funny, I go to see if that just is what it is or if something else is going on. And a big thing that I do find generally scary is reports, because a lot of times reports are not reporting on the exact thing. Like we had where I used to work, we had a new product, and then we had to have reports for it. And the way that the report was designed, refunds looked at negative numbers next to the order code. All right. And so the situation was the salesperson, if they sold this thing, they get $75. Okay. Right. but then somebody would buy the thing and pay for overnight shipping, and then call up 5 days later and say, the package just came and I want my $30 back. Okay, because it didn't come overnight. Okay, negative $30 tied to that code. The report sees that as a refund and took the $75 away from the salesperson. Right. And we could see how the report designer was thinking. Yeah, a negative number. That's like a refund. Not always.
No, right. I think that's
Which,
what
by the way,
scary data for me is people. Like, you know, you see a number, you make an assumption. You can't really do that. Like those numbers are on the page for a certain reason. They have those attributes for a certain reason. As a data analyst, our job is to determine those reasons. And like a question you would ask would be, you know, how do I address shipping refunds as compared to order refunds, right? Because those are entirely different. So, but I find in training people a lot from the very beginning, they see things and they just see what is in front of them, and they don't think past all of that rule that's behind all of that data. There's no such thing as data that doesn't have some form of rule behind it. So what scares me is when people don't learn those rules. Interesting.
Yeah. And by the way, to Oz's point, you know, as a data communicator, and you know what you're getting at, I think Oz is like the idea that I'm not usually validating data. I'm not there making sure the data is proper, appropriate, etc. My job is to communicate it. I'm assuming my client has properly analyzed it and discovered the addresses in the name field and all those issues. But that scares me. And I do, even though it's not my role to question their methodologies or any of the other things, I ask a lot of questions, because even to properly communicate, is this a refund, this negative number over here? Because I'm going to ask that question and they're going to say, oh yeah, good question. That actually, it's not a refund. It's actually blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes the validation of the data will come out of smart questions you have to ask to communicate it effectively, if you're lucky. But I do worry about that. I am scared of that too.
Yeah. And I tell you, you just reminded me more of that situation. Was the manager of the sales team, he came over to my desk and kind of whispered, this guy keeps asking me about this negative number, and I told him it's refunds, but I don't know. Can you tell me, do you know? And so then I got to pull the report, and of course it's all summaries. You know, it's summarized by month and product line and stuff. And so then I got to run another report and another report to dig down so that I can get to that granularity. And it might have taken me a week to get back to him and say, some of my refunds.
What?
Some
I hate
of
to
them are
break
not.
it.
Which brings up a good point. Aggregated data is scary because you don't know what's happening in it. But you know what? Disaggregated data is also scary because you can't see the insights. So in other words, you were right, Oz, in the very beginning. Everything is scary. We're going to all lose a leg. It's horrible, right? Like,
let's not lose our legs.
Right.
Let's not lose our legs. No, let's not lose our legs.
Unless you're fast.
Our heads. Yeah.
Fast.
Yeah.
Quick. Yeah.
Well, that's also scary.
Right.
So, being fast and quick with data is also very scary. So,
well, no, I mean quick, like in having a quick head, so you can, you know, like you see it coming, and then you say, boom, and then boom, that kind of thing. That's what I mean.
One of my favorite, one of my favorite stats guys. He'll say, "Do you want fast or do you want accurate?" That's his.
Oh, okay, right. Well, no, not fast in that situation.
Yeah.
Unless there is, and see, there's another thing, and deadlines, and having to meet the payroll deadline.
Oh yeah.
And knowing that the underlying data is vast and messy, and so every month when I was a commissions analyst, I would redo all of the commissions going all the way back to January 1st. So that was kind of like accepting the reality. And that's one thing that I've wrote in the book that I co-wrote with Bill Jelen. Um, Data is always messy. It's never going to be all clean, but you have to decide for your situation what is clean enough. And you can read that in Guerrilla Data Analysis third edition, which
Yes, you
came out
can.
in August. Yes, you can.
Yes, you
And
can.
I have a quote in there from our Robin Hunt.
Oh, yay. Yeah, and I'm
I
actually
do.
going to talk about that particular
Okay.
scenario today.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think all of this is very interesting. And again, our goal is to sort of like unpack all of it. And one thing I just want to point out is, to me, messy and ugly and dirty data does not scare me at all.
Okay.
That does
Okay,
not scare
now,
me at
okay.
all. Because I'm like, I know understanding the business rules and understanding the
Mhm.
objective, I can
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so dirty data doesn't scare me. It's not
Okay.
knowing like the provenance, to use Jenny's words, of that data. That kind of scares me. So changing gears a little bit,
Yeah.
can data start out not scary and then turn scary? If you face a situation where starts out okay and then you're into it and it turns scary. I think Bill kind of mentioned one, and when we were first getting started, about public schools. To me, that was like, you started out good and then it turned scary, really. But was it the data that was scary, or was it the insights?
So in that particular case, well, actually the data was also scary. So what this was the Boston Public School System was going through a master plan situation, meaning they hired an architecture firm to look at all the facilities. This is all about the buildings, and look at the state of the buildings and which ones need to be torn down, replaced, fixed, etc. And first of all, the data was scary because, you know, the engineers, the architects would go to different buildings and they didn't get a chance to really look at the HVAC system in this building, but so they sort of guessed. And in this building, they didn't get full access until like the day before the data was due. And in this building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the data was a little bit scary and inconsistent, et cetera. Then on top of that, yeah, the insight was Boston Public Schools, I can't remember the number, but yeah, it's 130 something schools in the district. And there's like, I'm going to make this up, like 50 high schools or something insane. And given the size of the city of Boston, it's ridiculous. Like they should have like 20 high schools. And so that's scary because, yeah, the insight is, why do we have so many freaking high schools? They should be half shut down. And then, you know, people would have to get on buses and go to more centralized high schools. And of course, given the history of busing in Boston, like just that word is scary, right? For understandable reasons. And so long story short, the insights were scary, the data was scary, and it got scarier and scarier and scarier. And by the way, the political implications were from every single perspective. Scary's in the eye of the beholder. The administration was scared to shut down the schools because of all the jobs that would be lost. Parents would be scared that the data was political and scary because now their kids would have to go to some other area and not have as many choices about where they go. The state would have concerns, and everybody would have different concerns. And so, yeah, everything about that was scary. And to your point about data turning scary, you know, data should be scary at the beginning because, yeah, you should be skeptical and nervous a little bit, but it can seem like, oh, this isn't too terrible. But then the more you investigate it, yeah, inevitably it can get more and more scary. The more you know your data, the more likely it is to reveal the scary parts, which, you know, is like a whole can of worms for sure.
Definitely.
What can I jump in? There's some interesting comments here. Tom Hinkle is saying you can have your feet in a bucket of ice and head in an oven, and on average you're perfect. And that,
Tom's been known for a good post here and there. He's definitely got some amazing insights on that.
Yeah. And that reminds me of a podcast I listened to where these two economists were talking, and the lady warned the guy. She says, be careful about averages because the average person has one breast and half a penis. Yeah. And let's see. Ellen Michael Caldwell, I love cleaning data. Yes. And I feel like that should be its own skill because a lot of analysts are taught on clean data. But where does a person learn to clean data? You got to kind of figure it out. And
I know Jenny Von Corder and myself and you, Oz, teach a lot of data cleaning. I think somewhere
along the way,
for sure.
Yeah.
So I think what scares me about so I'm naturally skeptical of every data set. Like, and I tell people all the time, I don't believe it. I mean, it's not that I don't believe in you. I just don't believe it. I got to get to a certain level of confidence before I'm able to because you're going to ask me to stand up and speak to it. Like, I'm going to have to feel good about it, or I'm not going to stand up and speak to it. And I would say probably one of the things that I've seen most in my professional life has been the assumptions that people will make when they see something. And it could be they see a big number and they think it's bad when it's actually good. They see a little number, they think it's bad when it's actually good. Like, they assume that this is all that there is. There's just so much in that assumption that makes me fearful. And to me, when I have good data and you start mixing in all those assumptions, it becomes not just scary, but dangerous. So that would be my thought on how data actually starts out not so scary, but turns pretty scary when, again, I guess I don't want to say it's humans, but it's the human element to it. I mean, again, you see something, you're going to have insights, you're going to have thoughts, but you got to be careful when you put those in with the data. They have to, you got to work through those assumptions and validate them as well. Can't just assume it's correct or assume it's this way or whatever, or just hope upon hope that it's what you assumed, only to discover it is not even close to what you thought. That's when data scares other people.
Right.
You know what the solution is to that one, by the way? Yeah, I see a big number, I assume it's good, but it's really bad, or vice versa, whatever. The phrase that I always use is that you need to get your head out of your data. In other words, you need to, the numbers don't have meaning on their own. A big number is not inherently good or bad. It is. And you got to step back from it to see that context, to understand that. So
yeah, awesome.
Little phrase.
And you know, there's something that I'll tell you, audience, we have a brief that we put together ahead of time. And so there was a discussion that seemed to be started between me and Robin about data telling you to do something that you don't want to do or isn't good.
Love this.
Like my blog post that I wrote that was designed to be jokey and provocative, but it attracted all kind of people who called me stupid and ridiculous, and it went on for years. And I go in the comments and say, don't you see that it was a joke? It was kind of tongue in cheek. Everything you said to counter what I said in the blog post is right. We agree on all of this. But they just piled on. But then my analytics say, do more of this. Well, no, that was not fun for me.
Yeah.
And then the response is, right, you got to get clear on what you're doing. Okay, the analytics don't come in here and grab me by the back of the head and say, damn it, write another provocative blog post. No. But what happens is I feel like a lot of the news media has gotten so divisive, so titillating, so inflammatory because the data says people want more of this. This other smart, important stuff, no, more of this. And so that's where, data can really have us in a mess, right? Because it's saying that people want this, and this is how you keep your lights on.
Well, you also in that scenario recognize the most important data to you is your audience.
Yes.
So regardless of what those engagement analysis and engagement statistics and hey, do more of this to drive more engagement, like you stay true to the data that really matters to you, which is the audience. And so I think that's another scary thing is when people don't focus on what is important to the audience or to the process or whatever, and get caught up in those like, oh, look at this, we can do this. Because again, somebody can click on your stuff and look at it, but is that the only time they're going to look? Only for that one time, or are they going to consistently come back and your audience consistently comes back. So I think using those metrics effectively and then considering all of them makes it way less scary.
The data showed smoking was cool, makes you more cool. The data also showed smoking causes cancer.
Yeah.
And at one time, the data said that 4 out of 5 doctors preferred particular types of cigarettes. Right?
That's right.
So if we did the survey and we had the data, and that, or how many dentists prefer something particular, 3 out of 4 dentists approve of this particular toothpaste. And it's like, why are they selling so many of the other ones then?
Yeah.
I remember wondering how toothpaste numbers sort of sorted themselves out and why we saw Crest ads all the time, but we didn't see a lot of ads for Colgate. And my dad just told me one day, he was a veteran of World War II. He said these little tubes of Colgate came in all the C rations. All the GIs learned to brush their teeth with Colgate. They don't have to advertise.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
That is definitely. So let's talk about scenarios we faced where we felt like they were actually really scary. Anybody want to tackle? I can get us kicked off.
Kick us off.
For us to set the frame here, but and I may have talked about this before. Was working with my team of people, which will go unnamed, as a part of a large project we were studying, and we got asked as this team to come into this other group because they wanted to study this information in their particular area. And there's a lot of common data sets between the two, but they didn't really have enough data to really get to what they were trying to get to. And they were trying to cherry pick, and they were trying to why can't we just use this? They were completely they were just going to skew the data so bad that it was like, okay, this is, and I just told the person in leadership, this is too scary for me. I can't participate in this. There's no way I'm signing my name to this. They're not even trying to use best practices here. And that was probably one of the scarier situations I've been in. Now, I'm fortunate now because I can decide I don't want to work on that and walk away from it. I think there's people out there who don't have that fortune. They're working for people, and maybe it's not dramatic. These people were not intentionally trying to be malicious. They just didn't know better. And it became very scary, very fast. Right.
I think the first time that you walk away from a job around data because it makes you so uncomfortable, it can be empowering. It can also lead to you having trouble paying your bills for several months, but it's empowering in a way. When I look back, I think a turning point in my career was when I was asked to do some data analysis and reporting for a not-for-profit. And they were really nice people. And the more we talked, I thought, I'm really going to enjoy this work. I'd been referred to them. I knew people who knew the leadership in this organization. And the more I looked at their data, the more I realized that the shape of the data itself indicated that they had cherry picked who they had fill out their surveys.
Woof.
Because there's absolutely no way that every single person who has stayed the night in their homeless shelter is totally thrilled with everything. It's really not possible, because I watched these people walking in and out. And then I realized that they were asking them questions that were a violation of existing laws around privacy and around recipients of federal grants. And I kept trying to talk to them. We went out to lunch together, and I finally said, I just really can't do this. I don't believe anymore in what it is you're trying to do here, because you're actually trying to use this data in order to justify some of the policies that you have in place that you're not allowed to have. I need to be out of here. And so, I lost some money, and I probably lost some future clients too. But I look back at that and I think I'm glad that I did that, because I don't know where I would be if I had learned to acquiesce to those kinds of requests. I was being asked to analyze their data in a particular way, to massage their data in a particular way, and to communicate it to a goal that they had already selected.
Wow. No.
Everything you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Every single thing I shouldn't be doing. But, you know, I kind of looked like, you know, maybe I would do that. I probably had a little bit of young and dumb sheen around me, you know, and they're like, we'll get them to do this. And my business partner at the time said, you've got to be crazy. And I said, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. No, every bit of that makes me, it's the same thing. So we are scared equally.
Yep.
By that scenario.
It meets every criteria of the scary checklist, right?
Yes. So Michael put a comment out here. I thought I don't know how we answer this, but you know, it kind of goes along the lines of here's how does someone who's just starting out as a data analyst say no when things don't seem okay? Well, I would say like it maybe not, don't come out and be like, no. But you could say these things make me uncomfortable because this doesn't appear to be following this best practice, or I am unsure where this data is coming from. I need to know a little bit more about the data. So you could just maybe open up the conversation, you know, and again, I'm going to like to choose to believe that most people are they're accidentally scaring us to death. They're not trying to intentionally be terrible people. And so I think opening it up with a conversation and a dialogue is probably one of your best first steps. And also, if you offer an insight into a best practice or a question they hadn't considered, they'll immediately respect you on a deeper level for that insight. So I don't think you come out and say, you know, no, don't do that. It's kind of like, let's kind of break this down and maybe just kind of figure out like, why is it making you uncomfortable? And address that in the team, and then go to the right person on the team to have that discussion with. That's
I would also say, go ahead, Oz.
When things would get scary for me, it was when I had to go deal with the people. And I found out 10 years after the fact that there had been a lot of efforts to fire me, but the people who could make the decision, they weren't with it. Because I would probe and dig and pick at the data, see what is going on here. And people have other things going on. I did get fired from a job, and a few years later, I talked with one of the managers, ran into him at a store, and I said, "What was it firing me out of nowhere?" The owner was cooking the books, and you asked too many questions.
Ooh, okay, all right, bye.
There's your answer.
Can't do anything with that.
Yeah,
right. And going to bat for customers. Getting up out of my desk to go dig into something that I knew wasn't my job, but I cared about these people whose lives were in disarray because we had problems with our data and processes and stuff. So I'm getting up and going to bat for them so that they don't have to keep calling. And that kind of thing had an X on my back. So many stories like that. But then also I was in a situation where I did trust the people above me to not fire me, but they might express very strong displeasure. Right. And I had to learn in my role, when I saw something weird or wrong, I would sit and think. In one situation, I saw something that looked funny. Took it to my director. He had a very cursory explanation and said it's nothing to worry about. But I wasn't so sure. And I went back to my desk and I looked for a few more days and I started seeing some really nasty stuff. And now I'm sitting there thinking, okay, he needs to know about this. But also a few days ago, he told me to leave this alone. So now I need to take something to him that he needs to know, but then also I'm going to be revealing that I'm hard-headed and ornery and difficult.
They hadn't figured that out already.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't seem like a big reveal. I'm just saying.
Yeah. You sort of what you see is what you get, Oz.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And I also eventually learned that if I showed up at somebody's office unannounced, something was wrong.
Mm,
I didn't come to say, "Hey, this data is done on time and it's right."
yeah.
No, I would come to say, this report that I've been getting for the past 8 months, it's got some other stuff leaking into it that should not be leaking into it. And we got a real mess. And then and then in that situation where I went back to my director, his eyes got big and he said, "Oh no,
Mhm.
all right, figure this out."
Yeah.
So I got the green light to go ahead, me and my ornery self.
Well, I mean, I think I think a lot of people are dealing with that type of scenarios. Like you have an idea, something may be off, you go, and it's going to be, who you're talking to what they're going to say. So, Bill, you had some insights on this too. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to.
Sure. I was just going to say, so I started my company when I was 26. So I was very young and stupid. Not that I'm much, smarter. I'm older now. But when I was young and stupid and people were trusting me to do things for them, what I found as a very disarming, technique to talk to people when the news isn't good is to just come at them with questions. So when you're like, "Hey, this is bad," no, that's never going to be as effective as, "Hey, where did this data come from? How did we discover this insight?" Actually disarming people with the questions and not doing it like to manipulate them, but truly like, because I guess that's just my personality. Asking the questions, then they look into it maybe, or you can help them answer the question by saying, "Well, for instance, it looks like the XYZ happened." That can be a really good sort of very diplomatic way of getting people to understand and hear the bad news, not feel like you're confronting, attacking, etc., and still get to a good place. And the other thing is worth saying though is that I lose my battles half the time, meaning like I might point out this is weird and they may say, "Well, we're doing it anyways." And then you have to make that hard decision. Am I going to be involved? Yes or no? Because not everybody can be convinced. The boss whose books were being cooked is not going to be convinced, "Oh, we should fix that," because he's clearly doing it intentionally, right? So you're going to lose battles, but you can certainly come at it diplomatically to have better conversations.
Yeah,
Really important to do that too, especially because we have a wide variety of experience who watch us talk on Data Fundamentals Unpacked. So you may also see something that is off-putting or doesn't quite make sense, and you go into reactionary mode, like you react to this and you're like, "Something's wrong with this is," and then they may very well look at you and say, "Well, did you know about," and then offer you insight into something that you had not discovered yet. So you have got to be careful with your approach. I mean, whether you're approaching data sets for the very first time, you're approaching an uncomfortable conversation, like the last thing you want to do is come in hot and all about it, and then be like, "Hello, there's 15 other data sets you hadn't explored yet that would answer every one of these questions." So I think that's something we should address.
It's sort of like the "Did you look at the other side of the page?" answer.
Right. You just turn it.
Never mind.
Right. And then just not knowing. And I remember asking the expensive off-site analyst about reports that he had written, and I was wondering why numbers don't match up. Is something wrong? And then he explained to me, this one has just revenue, and then this one takes into consideration revenue sharing. So that's why they don't match up. So nothing is wrong here. But nephew Sean Tom Ryan, he's got it, says scary idea. Looking at the simplest or the stupidest thing in data can sometimes make the biggest difference. And and one thing that I used to do is I would just dig into something just to see. And if there was nothing, no big reveal, no danger, then at least I understood a little better how things hang together. But you don't have to wait for a big disaster. Just be curious.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. So some themes I hear throughout this is maybe not the data is scary. It's the scenarios in which we find ourselves with data that can be kind of scary. And the conversations we face with our teams, our leaders, and whoever this project's with, those can be scary. Any other thoughts on things that can be scary in and around data projects, and I don't know, data visualization, Bill? Anything scary about data viz that you might want to point out to those of us who need all of those viz insights?
All right, we got 20 minutes left. I'll go. I mean, there's like an endless list of things that can be scary with data viz because, to Oz's point at the very beginning, I'm communicating this data out. Maybe I haven't validated it. Maybe I don't understand it well enough to really communicate it effectively, and 100 other things, which will affect things like even the ridiculous little things like how I set the scales. There's actually a great example at the beginning of the pandemic. Wall Street Journal, I think, did a chart showing, it was essentially a scatter plot. Well, not essentially, it was a scatter plot showing the infection rate on one axis and then the fatality, or whatever the right term is, the dangerousness on the other axis of a bunch of different viruses, SARS, MERS, measles, all kinds of things. And so measles are super infectious, but not very deadly. And SARS was pretty infectious, but pretty darn deadly. And whatever, and I'm probably getting those backwards. Long story short, they had the coronavirus was just like sort of a big box. So it was like it's somewhere in here, but we don't know yet because it was new, right? That's fine. It's all good. But because they used a log scale, so the infectiousness went, 1, 10, 100, 1,000, and same thing on the fatality, the dangerousness, which for people like us, like, okay, I get it. I can wrap my head. I know what a log scale is, A. B, I know how to read it, although none of us are that good at reading those, especially in a context like this. The problem with it was this. The coronavirus, that top of that box was extremely close to MERS and SARS. In other words, this might be just as bad, as scary as MERS and SARS and super infectious and deadly and blah, blah, blah. Well, it turned out log scale was like, this had a score of 2 and MERS was a 10, and so it wasn't nearly as close on a linear scale. Now, of course, they had to show it on a log scale because otherwise all the other ones would have been like way out here in the viz. But that's scary. It's scary like when you have something that has to be communicated one way to see all the data, but your audience is clearly going to misinterpret it. And that's just one example where your scales are not even incorrect. They're just interpretable. So yeah, Viz has a whole host of things you can worry about. Like I'm too scared to even start talking about it.
Don't be scared. You know what I'm scared of is when I see visualizations that really are, let me show you what I can do visualizations. Yeah. I really am scared of those. I'm scared of those, and I'm scared of those people. Like, oh no, let's not. And people do it with PowerPoint too. The PowerPoint is before dashboards. It was PowerPoint. They were doing that too, but now it's dashboards and data analytics. So yeah.
And I can tell you another example that worries me in the work that I do personally, which is, so someone has some data, they've done some insight, there's some really complex underlying algorithm that bubbles up this thing. In a specific example, I was working with a giant consulting firm, and they created essentially like an index to score this country versus that country on a whole host of measures and magically bubbled up into this single number. And when we created the web version of this thing, interactive, they wanted me to program in the algorithm. So in other words, they wanted to have the underlying raw data as the base data source, and my code would replicate what they had done in Excel or whatever tools they were using to essentially generate their own version of the index. So I had to replicate their logic, and that scares the crap out of me because it's like I could have one little mistake in my code, and it might look, if I just gut check the numbers, yeah, Sweden's number 1, Norway's number 2, well, cool, I guess I'm good. But it turns out that some other countries down here further on the list are out of order, or just the numbers are slightly incorrect, et cetera. So I always try to encourage people, like, you're going to do the smart, scary stuff. You do that and hand me just the output numbers. But for a variety of reasons, they didn't want to do that, and that scared me. So, and obviously scary. You can test to make sure it's truly correct, et cetera, but I never felt comfortable about it. Even when we finished the project and it worked, I continue to be scared to this day.
You really, because if you want it to be, if it's wrong, you really want it to be wrong everywhere.
Right.
Right? You don't want to be, it's wrong here and it's wrong here, and it's two different types of wrong, and which wrong is right, which right is wrong.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I mean, I would say something for us to maybe talk about and unpack in another episode would be, you know, how to gain consistency across your data. Like, yeah. Now, if they're asking you to build a separate algorithm to validate what's being produced in the source, well, that's a different project altogether.
Right. Totally.
You know, but that's not what you described. You just, it's like, yeah, I would be with you on that one, Bill. I'd be super like, why you want me to do this again? And it already, here.
I got a couple of things. One, I'm looking at LinkedIn user. LinkedIn user is quite prolific on this thread here.
Usually we see you as LinkedIn user. Is it
oh,
you?
no, not me.
Often shows up as LinkedIn user. Yeah.
It says, I love it when people ask questions about data I've prepared. Okay. That's an interesting one because there is asking questions and saying, yes, here's how I got this. Where's this come from? Yes, and I'm aware of this blunder over here, but I'm digging into it or whatever. And then there is the asking questions because they don't like the results.
Oh, yeah.
And then needling and needling and needling. And there was one person who tried to calculate the commissions on his own, and we had 2 meetings with my director. And at that second meeting, my director said, we're not going to keep doing this. Because yes, we're transparent. You have a right to know how the calculations happened, but you going and pulling data from the wrong tables.
Yeah.
And using the wrong formulas and not understanding the compensation plan completely. And we got to sit here and take time and explain this to you. We're not doing this again. So there's different types of asking questions. And
so let me just throw this out here while you're about to turn on to your next thing. I got a note that our broadcast is looping for some reason. I'm not sure what that's about. But there's a difference between asking questions about data that's prepared and then what Oz was just talking about, which is questioning the data that has been prepared, like questioning that the values are correct or incorrect. So, and I was asking Claudia who maybe that was for LinkedIn user in case we know who it is. And just because, again, like Oz will show up as LinkedIn user, but she's telling me that something's happened, like we're looping or something. So if you're seeing us in a loop, I'm so sorry. We don't see us looping, so I don't know how to fix that.
Well, if it's looping, I hope it's a really great part you're stuck in.
Or let's all make a scary loop face.
Yeah. Can't be answered by that. Oh, and so the other thing was one thing that has scared me multiple times as a freelancer has been building something for somebody and working with data, and then I'm told, okay, this person is going to be taking it over. And then I get, they don't want to take it over. First of all, they don't have a data background. And that's one concerning thing more generally. And that's worth a conversation on its own, is because so many people are having to work with data now and they don't have the data background. Somebody who's good at social media then gets promoted to a role where they're supervising other people who are doing social media. Now they're the ones who have to watch the data, and they aren't thinking about data quality and whatnot. But having somebody, building a tool and then having to talk with the boss about this person doesn't want to do it. They're asking me for like a list of instructions on what to do. And in one situation, there were a whole bunch of non-processes and ad hoc processes. And this person was going to have to be the one to instill processes around this tool I was building to help them manage data. didn't want to do it.
That's one of my notes I've written in here, is that processes in and around data can be very scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that one of you said earlier made me think that, and I thought I'm going to jot that down so I didn't forget it. And you just brought it up again. Yeah, processes are extremely important to the quality control of our data. But I kind of get it. Like, after building a company that's, I think we're 12 years old at this point. Like, you start out one way, and then you grow, and then things change, and then the process in which you used to do it is this way. Now you're doing it this way, and then I see this a lot in my professional life. People have grown so big, but they didn't change their process, so now it has become unmanageable for the people, and that is scary. It's one thing to like grow your processes; it's another thing to outgrow your processes. And when you do that, and you don't come back and check and refine, you're going to produce some scary data and probably some inaccurate reports. Just throwing that out there for topics here.
Well, and sometimes it's not keeping up with the change in processes. State of the art used to be having people do key punch to enter data for medical records. That was state of the art, that people would, somebody would be handwriting stuff. It would be shipped to somebody else. And I can't remember the number, but it's staggering. Like 60% of all the Medicare claims in Michigan had some keying mistake in the data that a person entering it directly would not have made. The best source of data entry is the person who understands or knows the data. So, but there are still lots of organizations that their methods are, let's take something and start typing. Right. Right. And so, and if we need to scale, we'll just hire more typists.
Yes.
So there's something about things not scaling, but also not taking advantage of technology that gives you data that is better. Data that is going to have a much higher likelihood of being valid than the data that you're working with now.
And that's, I love that example. Like the medical. So like I have a prescription that I take very occasionally. It's a very context specific use of a medication. Every single time I go to the doctor or the pharmacist or the dentist or whoever else, they say, "Oh, I see you take X, Y, or Z medication." I was like almost never. So like there's no setting in the database to say occasional use just in this situation. So, and the primary use of that medication has implications, and that's not why I take it. And so, yeah, like even things like the database design, right, can make the data scary, unrealistic, not accurate, et cetera, which we should be scared about.
And Jenny mentioned something that I find fascinating and important is what works for you. Because I went to a company, the guy wanted me to build an Excel solution around their data. And one of the co-owners, co-founders, he kind of whispered to me, he said, "Look, he's embarrassed that we're still doing our accounting on index cards and drawers. We don't need Excel. We don't need a database." And where he was coming from was these 3 or 4 friends started this company back in the 60s. And they're still friends. The business works. They're not trying to be an empire. They aren't really interested in forecasting and all this stuff. It is a thing to where they don't have to go get regular jobs. And it's been good for them. So we don't need all kind of fancy technology because there is nothing wrong here. And I just had to respect that. And I see the companies like small nonprofits, they want a database. They want a database. Okay. Who's going to configure it and maintain it? Nobody.
Can't even tell me, yeah. Who's designing it?
Right.
Right.
Who's
So you gotta, look at what skills you've got, what you need. Now, if they definitely need a database, then that's a whole different conversation than I've been hearing that we should get off of Excel and use a database. We want a database. Okay.
So scary topic is, the scary thing about that is people selling something just because that is what they sell, not because that is what is needed. And I am very proud to say we don't do that, because that drives me crazy. It makes life complicated, but yeah, I am just because we do it doesn't mean we sell it. And we don't just sell it to you because that's what we do. So very scary when people because a lot of people, they don't know, they don't do their due diligence because they don't understand what they're reading. And they haven't stayed up to speed with technology, which is lightning fast already. And then they spend all their money on something that they really should have never spent a dime on in the first place. And then they come back to the rest of us to say, please just fix it.
Yep.
And then I don't have any money left.
Right.
Well, so this actually brings up maybe the scariest topic of the day, which I probably shouldn't even say out loud. But, Oz, you just said, the nonprofit, we want a database. Who's going to maintain it? Nobody. The other question that relates to that is, who's going to ever actually look at that data ever again and make any decisions based on it? Also, nobody.
Yeah.
I'm actually working on a new talk, which I'm giving for the first time in a couple of weeks. The title of which is Data-Driven Decision-Making is Bull, because we actually don't make decisions based on data. Sorry. So in other words, this entire industry, our entire lives are bull. Like
hocus pocus.
Hocus pocus.
It's very scary.
Yes,
That's a topic for another day fully. But let's suffice to say that human beings don't really reason. We actually don't make decisions based on data. We make decisions on all kinds of other stuff. So happy to have a longer conversation about that. Maybe that should be a DFU topic.
We are definitely talking about that.
Let's do that. Let's bring Oz back, because his eyes light up too.
Yeah,
right?
I like that. Yeah.
Data driven is a marketing term. I like data informed. I tell people, don't be data driven, be data informed. Be data informed.
But how many times have we presented data and it has some clear implications that lead to particular decisions for an organization, and they look at that and they say, that's really nice, but okay. And I'll give you just a tiny example of that. I had actually applied for a position to be the IT director, a newly created position for the school district that I taught in. And I taught I didn't teach in the main high school. Okay. I taught in a high school where I'd largely worked with people who had been kicked out of school and had come back. Not many people knew me. I came into the interview and there were two other people, and one of them was a very popular high school teacher. And I thought I interviewed really well. I left and I came home, and hours later, many hours later, they said, we'll get right back to you after we decide. Many hours later, I got a call, and the call was, your interview just blew us away. We developed a rubric and you scored 29 out of 30 points, much better than anybody else. I'm thinking, this seems good. They said, but we really want Bill. So we changed the rubric. Right?
Wow.
Talk about a lack of data-driven decision-making, or even data influence, because you're right. The rubric meant nothing. It was
what?
Because
it's not,
they thought
it proves
it's
one
you.
6 points.
It's them. Yeah. It's not really, it's not you. It's us. I promise.
Right. And he was a lovely guy, but still, I would have been better at the job. Go ahead.
At least he was honest.
Exactly.
Because now you're talking about it years later as an amazing example of where they just completely disregarded the data. And you might be glad they did.
I am.
Yeah. I often look back at my career. My dad will say, oh, they really missed. I'm like, I'm glad they missed out. Because if I'd gone that route, I'd been doing something totally different. So I'm happy with the way those things turned out. So I'm Jenny, I'm glad that they made a rubric and then ignored it on your behalf.
I wouldn't be here with you fine people. I
love it. That's right. You were blazing the trail for me to come in and do content later. So I'm super happy it worked out.
But
I can't believe.
I'm just, oh my gosh, because Bill got me thinking, right? Because I think of how data gets used, and thinking deeper about it, some of the things that I'm coming up with is like this really data is being used as part of a scare tactic. And it's not the data that's driving the decision, it's data in support of a scare tactic or
Ooh.
to shift focus or to do some other kind of obfuscation.
Yeah.
Think about Zuckerberg talking about we're throwing $3 billion at this such and such, and we're 89.5% right. Okay, but then there's still a lot of people who are suffering.
That's right.
That's outside of the 89.5%. Or when they were selling those personality exams in the 90s and talking about the number of people who went against the test and hired somebody that the test said don't hire, and they hired them anyway. And 86% of those people regretted it. Okay, but are we talking about 50 people, 30
5,000 people,
5,000? What's going
10
on
people,
here?
all 10
10?
people, of
Right,
all
right,
10 people surveyed.
right,
Okay,
exactly.
well,
1 out of 7, right?
right.
and only 7 people were polled. Okay, well, we're at our time.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Oz,
That's
thank
scary.
you. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you for
thanks.
joining us. We're gonna definitely
Yes,
have you back. Don't worry.
yes. Please, please.
We
Yes,
do
I
hope.
enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation, and we're definitely gonna continue it. I think we got a lot of good things, like who's really using the data anyway. Are we really making data-driven decisions? Like, I can see us formulating our
Nope.
next episode. So I can't wait to see that talk, Bill. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.
All
Have a
right.
good one.
All.
Happy
All
October.
right. Yep.
Happy
All right.
October.